The night sky was heavy with smoke, and the air was filled with shouts, laughter, and the cries of the broken. The dark auction was alive, a cruel place where lives were sold like objects. Beneath the high iron lamps, cages lined the dusty ground, each holding beings from many worlds. Some were fierce-looking warriors, their spirits already crushed. Others were young and frail, eyes wide with fear. In the far corner, one cage drew a cruel kind of attention. Inside it stood a girl, her skin a soft shade of blue that shimmered under the flickering light. Her silver hair hung loose over her shoulders, tangled and dirty. Chains wrapped around her wrists and ankles. Her large violet eyes stared down, empty of hope. She was young, too young to stand in such a place. But this market never cared for age, beauty, or dignity. To them, she was only a prize. The auctioneer, a tall alien with sharp teeth and a voice like thunder, shouted loudly to the crowd. "Look at her! Strong enough to last, delicate enough to please, a rare jewel from the outer colonies. Who will start the bidding?" The crowd roared with laughter, voices echoing like waves. Rich merchants leaned forward, greedy eyes burning with cruel ideas. Some whispered what punishments they would test. Others laughed about how long she would last. The girl did not lift her head. She already knew what her fate would be. Every master was the same. There was no kindness in this place, only torture and chains. Her heart beat slow and heavy. She wished she had died with her family instead of ending here. Then through the smoke and the noise, a human stepped forward. He was not tall, not shining like the alien lords. He looked older, his hair streaked with gray. His clothes were plain and rough. He did not carry the wealth of the others, nor the cruel eyes of those who wished to buy. He walked slowly, his boots silent on the dirt floor. The crowd turned to stare. A human in the dark auction was rare, and many laughed at the sight. "What is this?" someone shouted. "A weak human in this place?" Another jeered. "Perhaps he wants a pet, or perhaps he wants to die." The auctioneer smirked, his sharp teeth glinting. "Do you dare to bid, human? Do you even have the coin?" The man's face was calm. His eyes, dark and steady, moved across the cages, but finally stopped on the blue-skinned girl. She lifted her gaze for the first time. Their eyes met. Her body stiffened. She expected hunger, cruelty, or amusement. But instead, his look was different. It was not pity, and not greed. It was something she could not name. The auctioneer raised his voice. "Let us start the bidding, 10 credits. A fat merchant waved his hand. 10. Another shouted, 20. The numbers climbed. 30, 50, 70. Each bid louder, the crowd cheering as if it was a game. The girl closed her eyes. Each number a nail in her coffin. Then, clear and firm, the human raised his hand. 100. The crowd fell silent. All heads turned. 100 credits was more than most would pay, even for someone rare. The fat merchant growled, 120. Another spat, 150. The human did not move. His hand rose again, his voice steady. 200. Gasps filled the air. The auctioneer's smile grew wide. 200. Do I hear more? But silence spread. Even the richest men hesitated. The human's bid was insane. No one would pay so much for a slave they could not even use for war or work. Finally, the hammer struck. Sold. To the human. The crowd exploded with laughter and whispers. "A fool!" Someone shouted. "What does he want with her?" Another sneered. "He will regret this." The cage door opened with a harsh creak. Guards pulled the girl out roughly and pushed her toward the human. She stumbled, her chains clinking. Her heart sank deeper. She dared not look up. This man had bought her for reasons she did not yet know, but she was sure it would end in pain. The human paid the auctioneer with a small pouch of credits. His hand did not tremble. He turned to the girl, his voice low. "Come." The single word carried no threat, but she followed because she had no choice. As they walked out of the dark auction, the torches flickered behind them. The crowd's voices still rang in her ears. She kept her head low, waiting for the cruelty to begin. Yet something in her chest whispered strangely, His eyes had not looked at her like the others. But hope was dangerous. Hope was a lie in this world. She told herself she would not believe it. The night swallowed them both as they stepped into the unknown. The girl's fate had been sealed, or so she thought. What she did not know was that this human had not bought her for torture. He had bought her for redemption, a choice that would change both their lives forever. The dark auction faded behind them, its cruel laughter still echoing in the alien girl's ears. Chains clinked around her wrists and ankles as she followed the human into the night. The air outside was cold and heavy with dust. She walked with her head down, expecting at any moment for his true face to show. She thought he would strike her, mock her, or drag her into some hidden corner to begin her torment. That was what all masters did. But the human did nothing. He walked ahead with steady steps, his figure calm against the shadows of the street. He did not look back at her. He did not pull her chain roughly. His silence was strange, almost frightening. She wondered if this was a trick. Perhaps he wanted her fear to ripen before breaking her. They reached the edge of the market where a small transport waited. Its hull was old, scratched by years of travel. Its engines hummed faintly. The human opened the ramp and gestured for her to go inside. The girl hesitated, her bare feet heavy. Inside the ship she saw no cages, no weapons, only worn seats and a simple metal floor. It was not the lair of a cruel master, but she could not trust appearances. "Sit," he said softly. His voice was calm, not loud or commanding. She sat near the wall, hugging her knees to her chest. Chains rattled as she moved. He walked past her and began starting the ship, fingers tapping switches, engines roaring louder. The ship lifted from the ground, leaving the market of screams behind. For the first time, silence filled the air, a silence so heavy that the girl could hear her own heartbeat. She kept her eyes fixed on the floor, waiting. He would speak soon, she thought. He would tell her what he wanted from her. But minutes passed, and he said nothing. He only steered the ship through the blackness of space. Hunger twisted her stomach, but she did not ask for food. She knew better. Masters sometimes offered food only to punish later. Her lips were dry, her throat ached. But still she kept silent. She was determined not to give him the satisfaction of seeing her beg. Then, without warning, the human stood. He walked to a small storage box. He pulled out a metal pack and placed it on the floor near her. Inside was bread, dried meat, and a flask of water. The smell hit her nose and made her mouth water painfully. Still, she did not touch it, she thought. Perhaps it was poisoned. Perhaps he wanted to watch her suffer while food sat before her. The human did not push her. He only said one word, "Eat," and returned to his seat. He looked forward at the stars as if she did not exist. The girl's hands trembled. She reached slowly, touched the bread, then pulled her hand back. Her heart pounded with fear, but hunger was stronger. She tore a small piece, placed it in her mouth, and waited for pain. Nothing happened. No whip cracked, no laughter filled the room. The bread was real, the water was cool and clean. She ate in silence, every bite both a relief and a curse. Relief that it was food, curse because it made her question everything. Why would he give her this? Why would he waste kindness on a slave? Hours passed. The ship flew steady. Outside, stars blinked like cold eyes. Inside, the girl curled into a corner, trying to keep herself awake, but exhaustion pulled her under. When she opened her eyes again, the lights were dim. The human was not in his seat. Her body tensed, panic rising. She turned her head and froze. He was there, standing near her. In his hands was a blanket, worn but clean. She pulled back quickly, expecting him to strike, but instead he only laid the blanket gently over her shoulders. His eyes met hers for a brief second. There was no hunger there, no cruelty, only a strange sadness. She whispered, her voice small. "Why?" But he did not answer. He turned and walked back to the cockpit, leaving her wrapped in warmth she did not deserve. She clutched the blanket, tears burning her eyes. She hated herself for feeling safe. It had to be a trick, she told herself over and over. Humans were no different, no better. They only hid their cruelty until the right moment. But deep in her heart, something weak and dangerous stirred, something she had not felt in years. It was not trust, not yet. It was the smallest spark of doubt, a question she could not silence. What if this one was different? The ship flew on through endless darkness, carrying with it a girl who feared hope and a man whose purpose was still hidden. Neither spoke for the rest of the journey. Silence was their only companion. Yet within that silence a bond had begun, fragile as glass, and just as easy to break. The ship drifted quietly through the endless black of space. Engines hummed low, steady like a heartbeat in the silence. The alien girl sat in the corner, her knees drawn close, chains still wrapped around her wrists. Her violet eyes studied the man at the controls. His back was straight, his movements calm. He had not spoken to her again, not after giving her food, not after placing the blanket around her. She could not understand him. No master had ever acted this way. In the dark auction, she had seen buyers laugh, boast, and curse as they dragged their slaves away. This human had bought her for 200 credits, a price far too high, and yet he had not touched her, not ordered her, not even threatened her. That made her more afraid. Kindness was a sharper weapon than chains. It broke hope into small pieces and then crushed it harder. She whispered to herself, "It is a trick. It must be." Her voice shook, but she wanted to believe her own words. The hours passed slow. The girl's eyes grew heavy, but she fought against sleep. She did not trust him enough to close her eyes. She thought, if she slept, he might finally reveal the cruelty she knew was hiding. But exhaustion won. Her head dropped against the wall, the blanket sliding from her shoulder. She fell into uneasy dreams filled with fire, screams, and the memory of her people. In the middle of the night, she woke suddenly. A faint sound pulled her from her dreams. Her body froze. Her eyes darted. The human was near. She gasped softly, afraid, but then she saw he was kneeling beside her, not with chains or weapons, but with a small bottle and a strip of clean cloth. In the low light she saw his face more clearly, older than she first thought, with lines carved deep by time. His eyes held no fire of cruelty, only a heavy shadow. He reached for her arm, slowly, carefully showing his hand so she could see. The girl stiffened, pulling her arm back. "Don't," she whispered, voice sharp with fear. He paused. His eyes met hers, steady, quiet. Then he said in his low voice, "Your wounds, they need care." Her heart thumped hard. She wanted to scream at him. She wanted to tell him to stay away, but her body betrayed her. The scars on her back burned every time she moved. The cuts from the auction still stung. She stayed still, trembling. Her eyes narrowed, ready to bite or strike if he hurt her. The man dipped the cloth in the bottle. The smell of medicine filled the air. He pressed it gently against one of her cuts. The sting was sharp, she hissed, her body jerking. But his hand did not tighten or strike. It stayed firm yet gentle. He whispered again, "I will be quick." Tears welled in her eyes, not from pain, but from the strangeness of it all. No one had ever cared if she bled. No one had ever touched her wounds with anything but cruelty. Why would this man waste his time, his medicine on her? She watched his face as he worked, his brow furrowed in focus, his mouth pressed into a thin line. He did not look at her as if she were property. He did not look at her as if she were weak. He looked at her scars with anger, but not at her, at the ones who had left them. When he finished, he set the cloth aside and leaned back. "It will heal," he said simply. Then he stood and moved away, returning to his seat without another word. The girl sat frozen, her breath unsteady. Her arms still tingled where he had touched her. She hugged herself tightly, whispering again, "Why? Why would you do this?" But he gave no answer. He stared out at the stars, silent as stone. She wanted to hate him. She wanted to keep her walls high, but something cracked inside her. It was small, fragile, but it was there. for the first time. Since her capture, she felt something other than despair. She felt confusion mixed with a strange, dangerous warmth. Later, when he brought another meal, she ate without hesitation. She still kept her distance, her body curled like a cornered animal. But when he placed water beside her, she whispered a single word, soft and trembling. "Thanks." He did not reply, but she thought she saw his lips twitch slightly, almost like a smile. That night, as she lay down under the blanket, her body sore but her wounds bandaged, she thought of her people, her family lost to the slavers. She thought of her old masters, their cruel laughter. And she thought of this, human, strange and quiet, who had done what no one else had done. He had shown her kindness, not for gain, not for show, but for reasons still hidden. She did not trust him, not yet. She could not. But in the darkness, her heart whispered again. That dangerous thought, what if he really is different? The ship flew on, carrying them farther from the markets of chains, deeper into an uncertain future. The girl closed her eyes, and for the first time in years, she slept without nightmares. The ship sailed through the silent dark, stars shining like cold fire across the windows. The alien girl sat near the corner as always, her knees drawn close, her wrists still bearing the faint marks of chains. Days had passed since the human had purchased her, yet he had not raised his voice, had not laid a hand in cruelty. His silence was still heavy, but his actions had been different. Each day he gave her food, plain but clean. Each night he placed the blanket near her. Sometimes she woke to find he had covered her when she had kicked it off in her restless sleep. At first she thought it was another trick, but the more it happened, the more her heart began to tremble with something she dared not name. She was not ready to believe. She reminded herself of the scars carved into her back, marks of whips that tore her skin, reminders of her broken past. No one could be different. No one could be trusted. Yet when the human walked by and placed a small jar of medicine near her without a word, she felt her chest tighten. One day, while he was repairing a panel in the ship, she moved carefully to stretch her arms. The fabric of her thin clothing shifted, and for a brief moment the human's eyes caught sight of her back. His hands froze. His tool clattered to the floor. She stiffened, her heart racing. She spun, around quickly, clutching her clothes tight, rage and shame flashing across her face. "Don't look at me," she snapped. Her voice was sharp, trembling. It was the first time she had spoken to him with such force. He did not reply at once. He only stared, his jaw set, his eyes burning with a strange anger, not at her, but at something unseen. He said, quietly, "They did this to you." His voice was low, controlled, yet filled with fire. She turned her face away, her body shaking. "Yes, and you are no different. You bought me, you own me," she spat bitterly. Her words were knives. She wanted to wound him before he wounded her. The human's voice stayed calm. "I do not own you." The girl laughed bitterly. "You paid for me. You dragged me away from the cage. You think that makes you different?" Her violet eyes glistened with tears, fury, and despair mixing. "I was beaten because I was weak, because I was small. My people were killed because no one cared. Do not pretend you are better." Her words hung in the air like smoke. The man's face hardened, but his eyes carried something else. He stepped closer slowly, not like a master, but like someone approaching a wounded animal. "I bought you to keep you from them," he said. "I bought you so no one else would." The girl froze. Her breath caught. His words struck her like a stone in still water. "Lies," she whispered, but her voice had lost its strength. "No one does that. Not for me." She turned her face away, hiding the tears rolling down her cheeks. The human's fists clenched at his sides. His anger was not at her, but at the images flashing in his mind. Her scars, her trembling frame. The thought of those who had hurt her. He forced his voice to steady. "You are safe here. No whips, no chains. Not from me." She shook her head violently, her hair falling over her face. "Safe? I will never be safe. They will come. They always come." Her body shook with the weight of her memories. She pressed her forehead against her knees, sobbing quietly. For a long time, the human said nothing. He stood still, watching her break, his own heart heavy. Then slowly, he reached to the table near the wall. He picked up the jar of medicine and set it gently beside her. "For your wounds," he said softly. Then he stepped back, giving her space. The girl stared at the jar through blurred eyes. Her trembling fingers reached out, touching it lightly. The gesture was small, but it meant more than she could admit. She whispered, "Why do you care?" But he did not answer. He returned to his work, leaving her with silence and questions that tore at her heart. That night, she could not sleep. She lay awake, staring at the ceiling of the ship. Her back still burned with old pain. But inside, another pain was growing. She remembered her family, her mother's gentle hands, her father's laughter, her brother's brave smile before the slavers took them. She had buried those memories deep. But now they rose again, pulled out by the strange kindness of a human she could not understand. She pressed her hand over her chest, whispering to herself, "Don't trust, don't believe. He will hurt you like the rest." Yet her heart betrayed her, replaying his words again and again. "I bought you to keep you from them." In the cockpit, the human sat alone, staring into the stars, his jaw clenched, his eyes hard. He remembered the faces of the men in the market, their laughter, their cruelty. He remembered the girl's scars. He made a silent vow, not to her, not out loud, but deep inside. He would not let her suffer again. He would protect her, even if it cost him everything. And so the ship moved on, carrying two broken souls. One, chained by fear and scars, the other chained by guilt and duty. Between them, silence and questions remained, but also a fragile spark, a beginning that... The ship drifted through open space, far from the dark auction. For a while, the alien girl thought maybe the silence would last forever. Each day followed the same pattern. The human gave her food, kept his distance, and sometimes checked her wounds. He spoke little, yet his presence was steady, safe in a way she could not explain. But peace in this galaxy was never safe for long. The girl felt it first, a strange tension in the air. Her body remembered fear before her mind did. The way the human checked his screens more often, the way his jaw tightened. It told her something was coming. One night, alarms broke the silence, red lights flashed inside the ship. The girl jumped, her heart racing. The human rushed to the controls. His eyes scanned the monitors. A low curse slipped from his lips. "They found us." "He," muttered. The girl froze. "Who?" Her voice cracked with terror. The human's face hardened. "Slavers." Outside the ship, shadows appeared. 3 vessels cutting across the black sky. Their symbols burned on the hulls, the same marks she had seen carved into chains and brands. Her chest tightened. Breath caught in her throat. They came for me." The human's hands moved quickly, steering the ship away. The engines roared louder. Space streaked past as he pushed the ship to its limits. But the slaver ships followed. They were heavier, stronger, built for hunting. Their weapons glowed red as they powered up. The girl pressed herself against the wall, shaking. "They will take me, they always take me back." Her eyes filled with panic. She looked at the human, waiting for him to agree, to hand her over, to save himself. That was what anyone would do. But instead, his voice cut through the panic, sharp and steady. "No one is taking you, not while I breathe." His words struck her like thunder. Her eyes widened. She had never heard such a promise. Not for her, not from anyone. The slaver ships opened fire. Bright blasts of energy tore across the void. The human twisted the ship, dodging as best he could. Sparks flew from the ceiling. Metal groaned. He pulled the controls hard, throwing them into a dive. The girl cried out, clutching her blanket. Like a shield, one of the slaver ships drew closer. A voice crackled through the comms, deep and mocking. "Human, give her to us. You cannot run. Hand her over and live." The girl's body shook violently. She whispered, "Please, don't fight them, you can't win." Her words were heavy with hopelessness. She was ready to be taken again, but the human slammed his hand on the comms. His voice roared, "Over my dead body." His words carried fire, not fear. The slaver laughed, promising pain. Then their weapons lit again. The human's ship shook under the impact, warning lights flashing everywhere. He gritted his teeth, sweat on his brow, his eyes sharp with fury. He pushed buttons, diverting, power to the shields. The ship rattled, but it held. He grabbed a small weapon from under the panel, a plasma rifle, old but working. He looked at the girl. "Stay down, no matter what." She shook her head violently. "They'll kill you. You can't fight them alone." Her voice cracked with desperation, but he only met her eyes, firm and unshaken. "I told you no one takes you again." The slavers latched onto the ship, their metal claws dug into the hull. The sound was deafening. Boots echoed as they boarded. The door shook under their force. The girl curled into the corner, trembling, tears streamed down her face. She thought of the cage, of the whip, of endless nights in chains. This was the end. But the human stood tall, rifle in hand, his body cast in the red glow of alarms, his face hard as stone. When the door burst open, slavers rushed in with snarling faces and cruel eyes. He opened fire. Each shot rang through the ship. Energy. Blasts lit the room. One slaver fell, another stumbled back with a scream. The girl gasped, her eyes wide. She had never seen a human fight like this. His movements were fierce, desperate, yet controlled. He fought not for himself, but for her. Every strike, every shout was for her. The slavers cursed, pushing forward, but he blocked them. His rifle fired again and again. When one came too close, he swung the rifle like a club, striking hard. Blood sprayed, his arms shook with the effort, but he did not stop. The girl screamed as one slaver charged toward her. She covered her face, expecting pain. But the human leapt between them, taking the blow across his arm. He shoved the attacker back and fired point blank. The slaver dropped, smoking. The human groaned in pain but stayed on his feet. At last, the surviving slavers stumbled back toward their ship, cursing. They dragged their dead and wounded, retreating under the fury of his fire. The claws released, and their ship pulled away into the blackness. The alarms faded into silence, leaving only the sound of the human's heavy breathing. He leaned against the wall, his arm bleeding, his chest rising and falling hard. The girl stared at him, her lips trembling, her heart pounded in her chest. "Why?" she whispered. "Why risk yourself for me?" The human met her eyes, his voice rough but steady. "Because no one else did." She pressed her hand to her mouth, tears spilling down her face. For the first time, she looked at him not as an enemy, not as a master, but as something else, something she could not yet name. The silence that followed was not empty. It was filled with the weight of what had just happened, with the bond forged in fire and blood, and with the truth that the girl could no longer deny. This human was not like the others. He was willing to fight, even die for her. The ship drifted in silence after the battle. Smoke curled from broken panels, wires sparked faintly. The smell of burned metal and blood lingered in the air. The human leaned against the wall, his arm bleeding, his breath heavy. The alien girl sat frozen, her violet eyes wide. Her chains clinked softly as her body shook. She could not believe what she had just seen. He had fought for her. He had stood between her and the slavers. He had taken wounds meant for her. For so long she had believed no one would ever protect her, that no one would ever see her as more than a slave. Yet here was a man who had risked everything. The girl crawled slowly toward him, her hands trembling. She whispered, "You are hurt." He waved her off, his jaw tight. "It's nothing." But the blood running down his arm said otherwise. She shook her head, grabbing the cloth he had once used on her. For a moment he looked surprised, but he did not stop her. She pressed the cloth against his wound, her fingers shaking, her voice cracked. "Why did you fight them? Why not give me back? It would have been easier." The human's eyes met hers, dark and steady even through the pain. "Because I told you no one takes you again." His words were simple, but they carried weight. Her chest tightened. Her eyes burned with tears. She could no longer hold back. Outside the window, the stars stretched endlessly, but danger was not gone. The slavers had retreated, but they would return. Their ships were larger, their forces greater. The human knew this. His face was grim as he checked the controls. "We can't stay here, they'll track us again." His voice was rough but steady. He limped to the cockpit, pulling levers. Engines sputtered, damaged but alive. The ship shook as it pushed forward, deeper into the darkness. The girl followed. Slowly hugging her blanket, she asked in a small voice, "Where are we going?" He answered without looking back. "To a place where they cannot reach you." The words struck her like a spark of hope, but also fear. She had heard promises before, broken and cruel. She hugged herself tighter, whispering, "There is no such place." Hours turned to days. The ship slipped through asteroid fields and hidden routes. The human barely rested, his eyes heavy, but his will unbroken. The girl watched him silently. Her fear had not vanished, but something inside her was changing. She no longer saw him as only her buyer. He was something else, something she struggled to understand. One night, as the ship drifted through a field of glowing dust, she sat beside him for the first time. Her chains rattled as she moved. His eyes flicked to her, surprised, but he said nothing. For a long time they sat in silence. Then she whispered, "My people. They are gone." Her voice trembled, but she forced herself to continue. "The slavers destroyed my village. They killed my parents. They took me because I was small, easy to control." Tears slid down her cheeks. I thought it was my fault." The human turned his head, his voice low but firm. "It was never your fault." She shook her head. "Then why? Why did no one come? Why did no one stop them?" Her voice rose, breaking. He clenched his fists, his eyes dark. "Because people like them only understand power, and because too many looked away." His jaw tightened. "But I won't look away." The girl stared at him, her breath unsteady. His words pierced through the darkness she had built around her heart. For the first time she believed, even just a little, that someone truly cared. Suddenly alarm screamed again. Her body froze, fear flooding back. The screens lit up. Slaver ships returning, larger this time, more determined. Her heart sank. "They found us." The human's face hardened. "Then we finish this." He pulled the ship into a dive, weaving through the asteroids. Blasts of energy tore past them, shaking the ship. The girl gripped the seat tightly, her nails digging into the metal. The human's hands moved quickly, his voice steady. "Hold on." He steered into a narrow canyon between two massive rocks. The slaver ships followed, their weapons firing. The human pressed a button. The ship jolted, releasing charges into the canyon. Explosions erupted, fire and dust filling the void. Two slaver ships were caught in the blast, torn apart. The last one swerved but crashed into the rocks, debris scattering into the dark. The girl gasped, her eyes wide. She had never seen such daring, such cleverness. He had not only fought, he had outsmarted them. The ship flew free, leaving behind only silence and drifting wreckage. The human leaned back, his chest heaving, his arm still bleeding but his eyes steady. He whispered almost to himself, "Safe for now." The girl stared at him, her lips trembling. Her heart pounded with emotions she could no longer deny. For the first time in years, she felt the faint glow of freedom, not just in her chains, but in her soul. She whispered, "You saved me." He turned his head, meeting her eyes. His voice was calm. "I promised I would." Her tears fell silently. She pressed her hand over her heart, whispering words she had not dared to say before. Maybe you are not like the others." The silence that followed was different now, no longer filled with fear, but with something fragile, something dangerous, something real. The escape was not just from the slavers. It was from her despair, her chains of the past. And for the first time she began to believe that maybe, just maybe, this human had not bought her to own her, but to save her. The ship floated quietly through the endless sea of stars. The wreckage of the slaver vessels was long behind them, but the memory of fire and danger still burned in the alien girl's mind. She sat near the window, her violet eyes watching the glowing dust trails that shimmered like rivers in the dark. For the first time since her capture, her body was not shaking, her chest still ached with fear, but beneath it something new stirred, fragile but alive. Hope. The human sat at the controls, his wounded arm wrapped in cloth. His eyes were tired but steady. He had not spoken much since the escape. He rarely did, but his silence no longer frightened her. Instead, it carried a strange comfort, a reminder that he did not need to fill the air with threats. She turned her gaze to him. Her lips trembled. "You could have left me. You could have given me back, but you didn't. Why?" Her voice was soft, heavy with the weight of her confusion. The man's hands tightened on the controls. For a moment he said nothing. Then his voice came low, rough, but clear. "Because I once failed to save someone else, I will not fail again." The girl froze. Her eyes widened. "Someone else?" He nodded slowly, his gaze fixed on the stars. "Years ago, slavers came to another colony. I was there. I fought, but I could not protect them. I watched as they took a child, just a girl. I swore if I ever had the chance again, I would not stand by." His words pierced her heart. For the first time she saw the weight he carried, not just duty, but guilt. Pain that had lived with him for years. He had bought her, not to own her but to make right what he could not before. Her chains rattled softly as she stood, her steps slow, careful. She moved closer, her blanket slipping from her shoulders. She looked down at her wrists, then up at him. "Will you take these off?" she whispered. Her voice trembled. For her it was more than a question. It was a test, a final chance to see if he truly meant what he said. The human turned. His dark eyes met hers. Without a word, he reached for the key he had kept hidden. He unlocked the chains one by one. The metal fell to the floor with a heavy sound. For the girl, it was the sound of a life ending and another beginning. Her hands shook as she touched her bare wrists. The skin was raw but free. Tears filled her eyes. She whispered, "I don't know what to say." He shook his head. "You don't need to say anything." The ship entered a quiet region of space. Stars glittered brighter. In the distance, a small world came into view. Green forests, blue rivers, a hidden colony where slaves had escaped and built new lives. The human pointed. "Toward it, there you will be safe. No chains, no masters, you will be free." Her breath caught. Freedom. She had dreamed of it in the dark of her cage. She had whispered it into her pillow when she was small, but now, standing here, she was afraid. "And you?" she asked. Her voice broke. "Will you stay?" He looked at her gently, shaking his head. "I cannot. My fight is not over. There are more like you, more who need saving. I cannot stop here, not yet." His words were steady, but his eyes carried sorrow. Tears slid down her cheeks. She wanted to beg him to stay. She wanted to tell him she was afraid of being alone again, but she saw the fire in his gaze, the promise he had made long ago. She knew he could not rest, not until his vow was complete. The ship landed softly on the green world. The door opened. Warm air rushed inside, filled with the scent of life and freedom. Figures appeared in the distance. Other aliens, children laughing, families gathering, faces not marked by chains. They rushed forward as the girl stepped out, welcoming her. Their arms open, their voices kind. She turned back. Her violet eyes met the humans one last time. Her voice shook. "I thought you bought me to hurt me. I thought you were like them. But you were different. You gave me back what I lost." She paused, tears shining. "You gave me freedom." The human gave a small nod. His voice was low, steady. "Live well. That is enough." Then he turned, walking back into his ship, his steps heavy but certain. He did not look back. The girl stood there, watching as the ship lifted. Engines roared, dust swirled, and then it was gone, swallowed by the endless stars. Her heart ached with both sorrow and gratitude. She whispered into the wind, "Thank you." As the colony welcomed her, she felt the weight of her chains fall from her soul. She was no longer a slave, no longer alone. She was free, and somewhere out there, the human who had risked everything for her continued his journey, carrying his vow, redeeming himself one life at a time, and though he had left, his choice had changed her forever. Because sometimes, even in the darkest places, a single act of mercy could become redemption.